Let me describe a situation and tell me if it feels uncomfortably familiar. Two adults, both educated, both working full-time. She works in a creative role, makes around $60,000 a year. He's in a technical job, pulls in just over $70,000. Together, they bring home more than $130,000 a year. On paper, they're winning. Statistically, they're in the top quarter of households. They should feel secure, they should be saving aggressively, they should feel ahead, but instead they're tense. Every month feels tight. There's always a quiet anxiety sitting in the background. They're not broke, but they're not safe either. They have reminders on their phone for bills. They check their bank account more often than they want to admit. An unexpected expense, a car repair, a medical bill, immediately becomes a problem. They're tired, not just physically, but mentally. They barely see each other during the week. Mornings are rushed, evenings are short and drained. Weekends disappear into errands and recovery. And here's the part that really messes with your head. They did everything right. They got the degrees, they built careers, they combined finances, they bought a house in a good area. They followed the plan exactly as it was sold to them. So why does it still feel like they're barely staying afloat? Why does a household earning more than 6 figures feel this fragile? If you've ever looked at your combined income and thought, we make too much money to feel this stressed, this video is going to hit close to home. Because what you're experiencing isn't a personal failure, it's a trap. And most people don't even realize they're standing inside it. I'm going to show you why households with 2 solid incomes often feel worse off than families did decades ago with just one. And if you're working alongside a partner, both of you grinding, both of you exhausted, wondering why it still doesn't feel like enough, make sure you subscribe. Because once you see this, you can't unsee it. Here's the story we were all sold. 2 incomes are better than 1. It sounds obvious, it sounds logical, it sounds like common sense. If one person can support a household, then 2 people should be able to support it easily and have extra left over. Extra for savings, extra for investing, extra for freedom. That's how the math is supposed to work. But that's not what actually happened. What happened instead was one of the quietest financial switches in modern life. Not a crash, not a scandal. Just a slow shift that most people never noticed. A shift where the second income didn't create security. It became a requirement. And once it became a requirement, the backup plan disappeared. What looked like progress turned into pressure. And that's where everything starts to break. For a long time, families had a hidden advantage. Not money, not privilege, not luck. Flexibility. Decades ago, most households ran on a single primary income. One paycheck carried the weight, the other adult managed everything else. And that mattered more than people realize. Because that second adult wasn't unproductive, they were a reserve. If something went wrong, illness, layoffs, instability, there was still a move left to make. That unused income was a safety valve. But slowly, without a headline or a warning, that reserve disappeared. As more households began relying on 2 incomes, something subtle changed. Expenses didn't stay the same. They adjusted. Housing adjusted first. When buyers suddenly had 2 paychecks instead of 1, they could qualify for bigger loans. Banks approved higher mortgages, prices climbed. Not because homes became twice as good, but because people could technically pay more. What used to be optional became expected. The same house that once required 1 income now required 2. Then came everything else. Childcare, healthcare, transportation, education. Costs didn't rise because families were careless. They rose because the system recalibrated around dual-income households. And here's the dangerous part. Most people didn't notice this shift while it was happening. They just felt like they were keeping up. Each decision felt reasonable on its own. A slightly better neighborhood, a slightly bigger house, a second car, paid childcare because nobody is home. None of these choices feel reckless, but stacked together, they do something brutal. They consume the second income entirely. Not on luxuries, on basics. And once that income is fully spoken for, something critical is gone. Margin. Now both incomes are required just to stay level. There's no buffer, no backup, no flexibility. If either income stops, the structure starts to crack immediately. That's why so many here-earning households feel anxious even when things are fine. They're operating at full capacity, like a machine running without slack. Everything works, until it doesn't. And when it doesn't, there's no room to absorb the shock. This is why people with solid salaries feel trapped. Not poor, not irresponsible, trapped. Because their lifestyle isn't built on excess, it's built on dependence. Dependence on both incomes arriving every single month without interruption. No layoffs, no burnout, no health issues, no family emergencies, just constant output. That's not stability, that's fragility, disguised as success. And the cruel irony is this: the more you earn as a household, the more convincing the illusion becomes. Big numbers create confidence. You see the combined income and think, we're fine. So you make decisions based on that number. The bank does too. And once those decisions are locked in, stepping back becomes almost impossible. You don't feel rich, you feel exposed. And that's the core of the trap. Not that two incomes exist, but that both of them are already spent before they arrive. Now, let's talk about what actually happens to that second income. Not in theory, not in motivational speeches, in real life. Let's use round numbers. One partner earns $70,000, the other earns $50,000. Combined income, $120,000. That number feels powerful. It feels safe. It feels like you've made it. But let's isolate that second income, the $50,000, and follow it step by step. First, taxes. Because of how tax brackets work, the second income doesn't get taxed gently. It gets taxed at the top. Federal taxes, state taxes, payroll taxes. That $50,000 quickly turns into something closer to $35,000 in take-home pay. And that's before life even starts happening. Now, add childcare. In a single-income household, childcare was handled at home. In a dual-income household, it becomes mandatory. The average cost of childcare in the US is around $15,000 per child per year. One child, that $35,000, is now $20,000. To kids, you're already at zero. And we're not done. To working adults means to commutes, gas, car maintenance, depreciation, parking, insurance. Conservatively, the second commute costs another $7,000 to $8,000 a year. Now the second income is negative. You're paying to work, but there's another cost nobody talks about: exhaustion. To full-time jobs means nobody has time or energy left. Cooking becomes takeout. Cleaning becomes a service. Yard work gets outsourced. Meals get pre-made. Convenience replaces time. These exhaustion expenses quietly drain another $5,000 to $10,000 per year. So let's add it up. $50,000 earned, minus taxes, minus childcare, minus commuting, minus convenience spending. What's left? A few $1,000s. Sometimes less, sometimes nothing. Someone is working 40 to 50 hours a week, missing time with family, living under constant stress, and the household is netting the equivalent of a few dollars an hour. And here's the psychological trick that keeps the trap locked. You don't feel poor because the gross number looks big. You see six figures on paper, so you spend like a six-figure household. You buy a house based on two incomes. You take on payments based on two incomes. The bank approves you based on two incomes. Everything works as long as nothing ever goes wrong. As long as nobody gets sick. As long as nobody burns out. As long as nobody loses a job. As long as life behaves perfectly. And life never does. This is where the trap snaps shut. Because when both incomes are already spoken for, there is no backup. No buffer, no margin, no flexibility. Lose one income, and you don't just lose money, you lose the ability to maintain the entire structure. The house, the cars, the lifestyle, the family isn't running with a safety net, it's running at full speed, with no room to slow down. Here's where the trap really closes. Because the problem isn't just that the second income gets absorbed, the real danger is what people build around it. When you see a large combined income, your brain adjusts instantly. You don't think in terms of safety, you think in terms of capacity. What can we afford? What do we qualify for? What does this income unlock? So you buy the house based on two paychecks, not the house that feels comfortable, the house the bank says you qualify for. You take on the mortgage that only works if nothing goes wrong. Two, incomes become the assumption. The default, the foundation, car payments follow the same logic. So do subscriptions. So do school zones, activities, insurance, and lifestyle expectations. Individually, none of these decisions feel reckless. They feel responsible, they feel adult. But together, they create something fragile, because now both incomes are fully committed before they even arrive. There's no buffer, no slack, no margin. Everything works as long as everything keeps working, as long as no one gets sick, as long as no one gets laid off, as long as burnout doesn't hit, as long as no one needs time off, as long as life stays predictable, and life never stays predictable. This is the part people don't like to think about. In the old single income setup, there was a hidden safety valve. If the primary earner lost their job, the second adult could step in. It wasn't ideal, but it was a backup. Today, that backup is already in use. Both adults are already working. Both incomes are already spent. There's no reserve to activate. So when something goes wrong, the fall is immediate. The mortgage doesn't pause. The daycare bill doesn't care. The car payment doesn't wait. Miss one income, and suddenly the entire structure shakes. This is why so many households feel constantly anxious, even when things are fine. Their nervous system knows the truth before their brain does. They're not stressed because they're irresponsible. They're stressed because they're operating at maximum capacity with zero room for error. Like an engine running at redline all the time. Eventually, something gives. And here's the most dangerous illusion of all. Because the gross income number looks big, people feel wealthy. They make decisions as if they're secure. But security isn't about how much comes in. It's about how much pressure the system can absorb. A household earning less with margin is safer than a household earning more with none. Yet almost no one is taught to think this way. Instead, we're taught to optimize for appearance, for approval, for what looks successful from the outside. And that's how people end up rich on paper and terrified in private. If this feels uncomfortable, that's a good sign. Because once you see this pattern, you can start doing something radically different. And in the next part, I'm going to show you the shift that breaks the trap completely without needing to quit your job, move to the woods, or make unrealistic sacrifices. I want to leave you with one final idea because it reframes everything we've talked about. This was never really about income. It was about flexibility. The families who felt secure decades ago didn't feel that way because they earned more. They felt secure because they had margin. They had room to absorb a shock, room to slow down, room to change direction. If one income disappeared, the system didn't collapse immediately. There was time to adapt. Today, many households don't have that. Not because they're irresponsible, not because they're bad with money, but because every dollar is already spoken for before it even arrives. 2 incomes come in, 2 incomes go right back out. Mortgage, childcare, transportation, insurance, food. Convenience costs that quietly pile up. There's no buffer. Everything works. Until it doesn't. And when something breaks, a job loss, a health issue, burnout, a family emergency, the entire structure starts shaking. That's why so many people feel anxious even when their income looks good. Because deep down, they know there's no margin. Here's the uncomfortable truth. A lot of what we call financial success today is really just financial fragility with nicer packaging. Bigger houses don't equal security. Higher income doesn't equal freedom. Cash flow doesn't equal safety. What creates real security is optionality. The ability to say, we don't have to make this decision out of fear. The ability for one partner to step back if needed. The ability to handle an unexpected hit without panic. The ability to choose what's best for your family instead of what's necessary to keep the machine running. And that only happens when your life isn't built on the assumption that everything must go perfectly forever. The families who actually win in the long run aren't the ones who earn the most. They're the ones who resisted the pressure to stretch to the limit. The ones who kept their expenses smaller than their potential. The ones who treated extra income as leverage, not entitlement. They didn't ask, what can we afford if everything goes right? They asked, what still works if something goes wrong? That question changes everything. Because once you see the trap, you stop blaming yourself. And once you stop blaming yourself, you can finally start making decisions from a place of clarity instead of stress. You don't need to earn your way out of every problem. You need to design your life so one problem doesn't take everything down with it. Now you see the pattern. The only real question left is what you do with it. If this video helped you see your situation more clearly, make sure to like it so more people who feel stuck can find it. And subscribe if you want more breakdowns that challenge the way we're taught to think about money. Because once you understand the system, you stop fighting yourself and you start playing a smarter game.